Here, on a small planet not unlike our own, live a race of creatures called Lumpties. For millennia, they lived, worked and played and had plenty of fun. Unfortunately, due to a freak galactic accident, their world changed considerably. The land masses drifted apart, some to the frozen north and some to the warmer south. The northern landmass became very cold over time, while the southern one became very warm indeed. The race of Lumpties was split into two groups, each inhabiting their own unique land mass, and so they became isolated from each other. Look at what happened to the tribes of Lumpties as their environments changed. Each group of Lumpties have adapted, over many generations, to suit the environment in which they live. This is called adaptive radiation. How will this change of environment affect their appearance? And why have these changes taken place? Over time, the Lumpties changed so much that they finally became a new species. This is called allopatric speciation.
Hi, today we are talking about speciation. Speciation is the formation of one or more new unique species from a current species. In order for one species to split into two or more, a faction within the species must not share its genetic information with the rest of the species. This is called reproductive isolation, and there are two main categories of contributors to this isolation: prezygotic barriers and postzygotic barriers, so named for whether they occur before or after fertilization. Prezygotic barriers result when two groups within a species isolate themselves from one another in some way. So let's look at some examples. Temporal isolation occurs when members of the same species are active at different times of the day, month, or even year. More specifically, they breed at different times. For example, if some members of a group breed during the day and others breed during the night, they are isolating themselves from one another and not sharing genetic information. The same would be true for one group breeding in the spring and the other breeding in the fall, again, both from the same species. Behavioral isolation is another. In this case, members of the same species behave differently, especially with their mating practices. So these members may have slightly different mating rituals that don't attract members of the other group, thus isolating who they mate with. Others include mechanical isolation, where some members physically can't mate with others, habitat isolation, where the habitat occupied by members of a species differs and thus breeding interactions differ, and gametic isolation, which occurs in aquatic animals. You can learn more about all of these by following the links in the description.
Biodiversity is a term that represents the total variety of all life on Earth. That's a big thing to sum up. Thousands of different wild habitats, millions of different species, billions of different individuals, and the trillions of different characteristics they all have. The total biodiversity of our planet is immense, which is a good thing, because the more biodiversity, the more secure all life on Earth is, including ourselves. Only when life is at its most varied, vigorous, biodiverse, can we hope to thrive. We may not know it, but we need towering forests across 1/3 of the land surface to lock away carbon and keep the climate stable. We need millions of pollinators and billions of soil organisms and megatons of plankton to keep the food we eat in supply. We need strange plants deep in jungles to create our medicines, and coral reefs and mangrove swamps to protect the coasts we depend upon. Our planet's biodiversity provides all the things we need for free. But it will only do so if there's lots of it, and at the moment it's under attack. In the last 50 years, our activities have dramatically reduced biodiversity across the globe. We've snuffed out habitats, reduced populations of wild animals by 60%, and even driven whole species extinct. The number of lions in Africa has dropped by 65%. The number of individual flying insects in Europe has dropped by 75%. The number of bluefin tuna in the Pacific has dropped by 95%. Biodiversity is dropping everywhere and fast. This is catastrophic for nature and therefore ourselves. We talk about climate change a lot, but biodiversity loss is as important an issue. How do we stop this loss of life? How do we ensure that biodiversity, our planet's vital statistic, begins to increase again? In fact, we already know exactly what to do.